This video shows the violent crash Tuesday morning involving a shooting victim on Indy's northwest side.
The morning of February 17th, 2020 in Indianapolis was cold but calm. Frost still clung to lawns and thin ribbons of exhaust drifted from idling cars as people prepared for their Monday routines. On the surface, it was an ordinary day. But for one woman, the events about to unfold would turn this quiet winter morning into the opening scene of a tragedy that would echo through a city and leave families grasping for answers that might never fully come.
And I start calling his phone, and wasn't nobody answering. On my shop phone, I got a little flip. It's my shop phone, right? So, girl, yeah. So I'm on my little shop flip phone, and I'm like, boom, calling my cell phone. Calling his phone, ain't want nobody answer. So I'm like, damn. So now I done got back over there. I done parked right up by the front door though, thank God, because they chased me out of there. They was trying to kill me. Y'all, they tried to kill me. So anything happened to me, y'all know they tried to kill me today. Them niggas. And then when I got in the car, I started talking shit. If anybody knows me, that's how I get down. As soon as I get to the car, when I get close to my pistol, I'm really talking shit now. So wait a minute. So look. I'm in here. Hold on. I'm banging on the door. I'm like, boom, boom, boom. So I'm knocking on this motherfucking door. I'm like, I need my fucking phone. That's my money bag. I'm like, hitting this motherfucking door. And I'm like, won't nobody come to the fucking door, right? I'm like, damn. Something told me to check the door. That motherfucker was unlocked. When I stepped in there, y'all. Oh my God, my stomach hurts. My stomach hurts. When I walked in there, y'all, what I seen with my own two eyes. Hold on. Thank God my phone was sitting on the table right there by the door. I swung that door, but I said, ah! And I couldn't even talk the words. I couldn't get the words out of my mouth right. So I'm like, I'm trying to breathe. I'm like, and I just looked down and see my phone. I snatched my phone. They was standing there just staring at me. So them motherfuckers looking like the devil. They was looking like they was really trying to kill me. So I just grabbed my phone off my. I was like, so I jump in, start running. I done jump back in my car. Remember I told you I parked up by the door, right? So I get in my fucking car, and as I'm backing down, I'm like, hey, you motherfuckers, y'all better come up out some money. Y'all be talking that big money and shit. Give me a couple of bands or something now, cause this right here, this is unacceptable. I'm out the window like, you motherfuckers is trifling, and you bitches think y'all ain't gonna get me. So wait.
Her name was Jane Warfield, a woman who was no stranger to attention, conflict, or controversy. She wasn't famous in the traditional sense, but in her community, people knew her name. She was bold, outspoken, and fiercely independent. She owned a tire shop, provided for her kids, and had a reputation for speaking her mind, sometimes in ways that earned her admiration, other times in ways that made her enemies. What happens when a voice that loud meets a world that can be just as loud back? And what happens when the stage you stand on is the internet, where nothing ever really disappears? For Jane, social media wasn't just a suggestion box, it was a stage. Facebook wasn't a casual drop-in space where birthdays and backyard barbecues lived. It functioned as her megaphone. It was the place where she told stories, aired grievances, and, if she felt wronged, turned her grievances into performances. She understood attention, and more than that, she understood timing. She knew how to make people stop scrolling and start listening. And on that February morning, she opened Facebook Live once again, her tone sharper than usual, her eyes lit with a mix of agitation and urgency. She didn't rush. She started off slow, almost casual, the way someone who knows they're holding a grenade might toy with a pen. She greeted familiar names in the comments. She let the viewer count climb, and climb. This was deliberate. Jane knew how to hold an audience's attention. She dropped small hints that she had something important to say, building anticipation with the kind of pauses that make people lean closer to their screens without realizing they're doing it. Isn't that how big moments arrive sometimes, disguised as small talk until suddenly they aren't? Then, without much warning, she dropped her bombshell. Jane told her viewers she had been doing business with a man named Jamil, someone she had once been romantically involved with years before. That very morning, she said, she had been at his uncle's house to handle some business. On her way back toward her shop, she realized she had forgotten her phone. An everyday mistake, right? A detour we've all made? But some detours don't just change a route, they change outcomes. What happened next, according to Jane, changed everything. She claims she returned to the house and tried calling both her phone and Jamiel's phone, but got no answer. When she arrived, she knocked on the door. No response. Something made her try the knob. It was unlocked. She pushed the door open, and what she claimed to see left her in shock. In her own words, she said she walked in on Jamiel in an intimate situation with another man. Not just any man, but his own cousin. She described feeling physically sick, stunned into silence for a moment. She said the two men stood frozen, staring at her, their expressions cold, what she described as looking like the devil. If you were watching live, would you have believed her on the spot? Or would you have felt that tiny splinter of doubt that arrives when a story is almost too explosive to process all at once? Jane claimed they chased her from the house, but before she left entirely, she made a calculated choice, one that would ignite a firestorm. She told her audience she demanded $5,000 in exchange for keeping the encounter a secret. If she didn't get it within an hour, she said, she would tell the whole city. There's a word for that, there are several, depending on who you ask, but the simplest one most people reached for that day was blackmail. Was it a bluff? Was it leverage? Or was it a mistake that couldn't be walked back once said out loud to thousands? Jamiel refused to pay. And so Jane went live. Right there on Facebook, she named him, described him, and detailed exactly what she claimed to have seen. She didn't blur faces or hide identities. She put it all out for the public to hear. The video began to spread almost immediately, pinging across the city from phone to phone, traveling at the speed of outrage and curiosity. How many reputations have been rewritten by the press of a go live button? How many lives shifted sideways in the moments between start broadcast and end? By the end of the day, Jane's accusations were a topic of conversation in Indianapolis. Some supported her for telling the truth, while others accused her of crossing a dangerous line, possibly even attempting extortion. A few called her brave, a few called her reckless. More than a few were glued to their screens for more, but Jane didn't back down. Later that night, she went live again, doubling down on her claims, repeating names, and telling viewers that if anything happened to her, they would know exactly who to suspect. It sounded like a dare wrapped in a warning. It also sounded like an alarm someone might not be able to silence. The next morning, Jane's warning would take on an eerie new weight. Around 10 a.m., gunfire echoed across the northwest side of Indianapolis. Multiple witnesses reported hearing it, the kind of sound that snaps a neighborhood out of its routine. Seconds later, a bright yellow Camaro, Jane's car, was seen barreling down the street at speeds nearing 100 miles per hour. It wasn't a joyride, it was an escape attempt. Or was it reflex? Was it panic? Was it the body trying to survive when the brain can't keep up? What witnesses couldn't see was that Jane had already been shot twice in the head. Whether she was still conscious or her body was simply reacting, she ran a red light at a busy intersection and slammed into another car. The force of the collision sent the other vehicle spinning 3 times before coming to a stop. Bystanders ran toward the wreckage. They found Jane slumped in the driver's seat, bleeding heavily, her breathing faint. Emergency crews arrived quickly, pulling her from the vehicle and rushing her to the hospital, but the damage was too severe. At 9:38 a.m., just hours after her explosive live stream, Jane Warfield was pronounced dead. Police wasted no time in calling it what it was, a targeted killing. This was no random act, no road rage incident gone wrong. Someone had gone after Jane specifically. And given her videos from the day before, most people believed they knew exactly who that someone was. Social media lit up. "Did you see Jane's live?" became a question whispered and texted across the city. People took sides the way people often do, based on proximity, on feeling, on the last thing they saw on their phone. Some argued she had brought trouble to her own door. Others insisted no one should die over a Facebook video. But one name kept coming up again and again: Jamie L. Carter Sr. Was that intuition, or was it narrative gravity pulling everyone toward the most obvious suspect? Officially, police named no suspects. No arrests were made. The man Jane had accused disappeared from public view. Months passed, then years. Jane's family continued to push for answers, holding vigils and pleading for justice, but the case remained unsolved. In the quiet parts of the city, the ones that don't make headlines, grief takes its time. It shows up in the faces of children who have questions their caregivers can't answer. It shows up in the silence of a shop that still smells like rubber and solvent and memory. What do you say when the story you thought you knew stops making sense? Then, on October 6th, 2022, nearly 2.5 years after Jane's death, the story took a dramatic turn. Police responded to a shooting in the Hawville neighborhood, the same area Jamie L. had once claimed loyalty to in Jane's video. When officers arrived, they found a man shot dead in a field. The victim was identified as 41-year-old Jamie L. Carter Sr. Just like Jane, his killing appeared to be a targeted hit. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Was this payback for Jane's death? Street justice finally catching up? Or an unrelated act of violence that just happened to rhyme with the past? While the city debated, a quieter and more complex truth began to emerge, one that shifted the lens on everything we thought we knew about the case. Friends of Jane came forward, claiming her viral accusation had been a lie. They said there was no compromising scene, no affair between Jamie L. and his cousin. Instead, they alleged the real dispute was over money, specifically a tax refund scheme gone bad. How does a rumor grow legs? And how does anger pick up a megaphone and call itself truth? According to these accounts, Jane had agreed to let Jamie L.'s cousin claim her children on his taxes in exchange for part of the refund. When pandemic-related delays hit, she believed the money had already been received and demanded her share. When it didn't come, she retaliated by creating a scandal designed to ruin Jamie L.'s name. In that telling, the live stream wasn't a public service. It was pressure. It was leverage. It was a match dropped in dry grass. Have you ever said something out loud you couldn't take back, knowing even as the words left your mouth that the echo would be louder than you expected? Those who knew her also pointed out that Jane had been in multiple disputes with other people around the same time, some of them violent. She had gone live on Facebook to call out others by name, accusing them of betrayal, theft, and worse. There were reports of shooting incidents in the months leading up to her death. In other words, Jane's list of enemies was long, and any one of them could have wanted her gone. When you live loud, the list of people who want you to turn the volume down can grow longer than you realize. The question is, who turns it down for you, and how? Looking back, her original story raised questions. The timing was tight, too tight, some said, for what she claimed to have happened. She said she went to his uncle's house, not his. She said she left, drove almost all the way to her tire shop, then realized she'd forgotten her phone and returned. In that small window, the men inside supposedly began something so risky, with the door unlocked, knowing she might return. Add to that the era, February 2020, when refunds were delayed nationwide and everyone's plans were fraying at the edges. With multiple friends swearing the event was fabricated, the theory that this was all born from a business dispute gains weight. What breaks first when money is tight? The truth, the trust, or the peace? But in the end, the truth may never be fully known. Jane is gone. Jamie L. is gone. And with them, the full story of what happened between them. What remains is a cautionary tale about how quickly private disputes can become public battlegrounds, and how once you go public, you can't control the fallout. Jane's decision to live stream her accusations set off a chain reaction that ended with 2 people dead, families shattered, and a community still searching for answers. If a single video can start an avalanche, how do you stop it once it's already moving? To understand the emotional weather of those days, imagine the tire shop where Jane once stood behind the counter, hands stained black from lug nuts and brake dust, phone tucked against her shoulder. Regulars would come in, ask about specials, swap gossip while their wheels were balanced. After her death, those rhythms changed. People lowered their voices. The bay doors still rolled up in the mornings, but the air felt different. Loss has a way of making a room feel colder, even when the space heater's on full blast. And imagine the neighborhood where the yellow Camaro took its final turns. The skid marks faded by rain, the corner where strangers had thrown flowers into the grass. For a while, broken taillight plastic glittered in the gutter like confetti from a party no one wanted to attend. People crossed the intersection more carefully. They looked both ways twice. Trauma lingers in place as much as in memory. Do we ever drive through a street the same way once we know what happened there? There were vigils, a few candles gathered on a chilly evening, then more as word spread. There were posters with Jane's photo printed at the kind of copy shops that see too many faces like hers. There was the unphotographed part too, the private tears, the conversations at kitchen tables that begin with, "What do we tell the kids?" and end in silence because the words never feel big enough. And there was fear. What if the shooter was still out there? What if saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could make your own name show up in a comment thread tomorrow? As the months rolled into years, the case stayed unsolved. Online, theories multiplied like reflections in a funhouse mirror. Some insisted the simplest story must be true. She exposed him. He retaliated. End of story. Others pointed to the louder noise beneath the headline, the tax scheme whispers, the other feuds, the way her circle and his intersected with people who prefer problems be solved off the record. Maybe the truth wasn't a single straight line. Maybe it was a web and everyone tugging a different strand was sure they'd found the center. When Jamiel was killed in 2022, that web didn't snap. It tightened. For some, it felt like balance. For others, like confirmation that once you enter the cycle of violence, exits are hard to find. But there was also a quieter realization. With him gone, any explanation he might have offered vanished too. The two people at the heart of the story were now both in the ground, and all we had left were the versions others told about them. How much of any story survives in the retelling? How much do we reshape to fit what we need it to mean? People who had known Jane the longest said she had a way of pushing people beyond their breaking point. She could be relentless, crossing lines others treated as fences, not suggestions. She didn't just argue. She attacked with words that reached into families and jobs, into the places people feel most vulnerable. There were stories, unverified to some, unforgettable to others, of her printing mock obituaries with people's faces. In a world already on edge, that kind of move turns arguments into wars. If humiliation is a lit match, what happens when you strike it over a barrel of gasoline called pride? At the same time, you can't read her story and not see another thread. A woman hustling to keep her business alive, a mother managing the constant math of bills, rent, school supplies, and groceries. The promise of quick money, from a refund, from a debt someone swears they'll pay back, can feel like a lifeline when the ledger's in red. Was she desperate? Was she calculating? Was she both? We are messy combinations of our best hopes and worst impulses. The tragedy is that sometimes the worst wins by inches, not miles. Then there's the echo we don't talk about as loudly. Less than a week after Jane's death, her daughter's boyfriend was killed. The ripples widened. The map of grief redrew itself. The young are not supposed to be fluent in the language of funerals, but too often they are. Was it connected? Was it coincidence? Was it the wrong place at the worst possible time? Each answer is a door, and behind each door is a life that won't be lived the way it might have been. Let's talk about the investigation beats without dressing them up. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood. They looked for cameras pointed toward the right corners at the right minutes. They asked questions in places where questions are sometimes traded for silence. They listened, they waited, they probably heard 5 versions of the same minute that didn't match. That's the thing about violent moments. They ripple outward into witnesses who swear they saw what they saw. Only the light was different for each of them. Memory is a camera without a tripod, stable some days, shaky on others. How do you solve a case when every angle is a little blurry? And through all this, the internet kept breathing. A clip of Jane's live was saved and reposted and stitched into new videos. Commentary layered over commentary, like coats thrown over the same chair. People who didn't know Jane tried on what it might mean to be her, to be him, to be the cousin, to be the neighbor who heard the shots. We try on other people's lives because it makes the scary parts feel almost manageable, until we realize the fabric doesn't fit and the seams are already tearing. Rewind, just for a moment, to the logic check that so many came back to later. Jane said she left the uncle's house, drove nearly to her shop, then remembered her phone and turned around. Meanwhile, the door remained unlocked, and inside, the men supposedly started a scene they had to know could be interrupted at any second. Does that read as likely? Or does it read like a story crafted to sting the most? If the goal was to force payment through embarrassment, wouldn't the most damaging story be the one most likely to spread? Shame travels faster than nuance. That's not new, it's just more visible now. But whether the story was fabricated or not, the bullets that struck Jane were real. The crash was real. The hospital pronouncement at 9:38 a.m. was painfully, unchangeably real. It's possible to condemn the choices she made and still mourn the life she lost. It's possible to acknowledge that she sometimes crossed lines and also say that death is an unforgivable response. We're allowed to hold two truths at once: that actions have consequences and that some consequences go too far. So what do we do with a story like this, beyond watching it and feeling the ache of it? Maybe we treat Go Live like the loaded action it is. Maybe we count to 10 before we say a name into a microphone the whole world can hear. Maybe we ask ourselves whether revenge is worth the echo it sets off. And maybe we remember that the internet is not a courtroom, and comment sections are not verdicts. And once you give a rumor a megaphone, it doesn't politely hand it back. There's another angle too, the city itself. Indianapolis is big enough to hide in and small enough for news to get around. There are corners where everyone knows everyone, and the overlap between loyalty and fear can be hard to tell apart. In neighborhoods where beefs don't always end with apologies, people learn to speak in suggestion and silence. Against that backdrop, Jane's volume was always going to draw a response. The question was what kind of response and from whom. When Jamiel died, some said the scales balanced. Others said nothing balances death. Both can be true depending on which names were in your phone, which faces were at your kitchen table, which stories you heard first. What's left now are anniversaries that arrive like uninvited guests in a set of takeaways we should repeat until they stick. The internet remembers. Pride is a poor bodyguard, and once a chain reaction starts, you don't control what it hits next. If you've stayed with me to this point, you've noticed I haven't given you a single satisfying answer wrapped in a bow. That's because there isn't one. There's a timeline with jagged edges, a pair of funerals, a list of enemies wider than a single suspect, and a city that can't agree on what happened in a house with an unlocked door. Maybe the closest thing to closure here is the caution sign blinking in our faces. What you stream can outlive you, and what you say to get paid back might cost more than the debt was worth. So where does that leave us? With a woman whose life was complicated and loud and cut short? With a man whose name sits at the center of the story and who can no longer answer for it? With families who wake up on birthdays and wonder who their people might have been by now? With a community that learned again how thin the line is between drama and danger when it plays out in real time, in public, with receipts and reposts trailing behind? Rest in peace to all who lost their lives in this tangled feud. May the families who carry their names forward find whatever version of peace is possible when the truth is tangled and the past won't sit still. And may we, watching from our screens, remember that words are not weightless, that the red-hot moment fades, but its consequences keep walking. If this story gripped you, if it made you think twice about how fast stories spread and how hard they are to pull back, do me a favor. Like this video so more people see it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. We've got more real cases ahead, just as shocking, just as unpredictable, and I promise I'll bring you every angle I can with the care stories like these deserve. Turn on notifications, drop your thoughts in the comments, and tell me, what part of this case stuck with you the most?